The Dvadasamsa becomes really interesting when you start looking at what the important Grahas and Bhavas are. So, it's the 12th Varga. Dvadasamsa is the 12th Varga. That makes the 12th Bhava the most important Bhava. Okay? Now, this sounds strange at first when we're told that the Dvadasamsa is for parents. And then we go 12th Bhava. What does 12th Bhava have to do with parents? It's not. We know the 4th Bhava is the mother, the 10th Bhava is the father, the 9th Bhava are the parents as a whole, which is usually led by the father in a traditional culture like India. And what I mean by that, just to rephrase the 9th house idea of the father and parents, some books give the father to the 9th house. Parashara actually says 10th house father, but the majority of books actually go 9th house father. And that's in the context of the parenting culture that people grow up under. In India, traditionally, the woman would go to the man's family and adopt his religion, his culture, basically. And everything, and his food, and things like that. So his culture would dominate the parenting influence. His mother would be there to help raise the kids. His father would be there to play with the kids. Hers would be over at her house, perhaps in a completely different city. So the father's influence was so much stronger, so that house became a father house. But the 9th house is the parental influence, which in a modern culture is relatively balanced, meaning equally mother and father's cultural influences in that. And of course, for what people have a single mother, then the 9th house, their parental influence would be the mother. And of course, there would be afflictions to that 9th house to show that the parental influence wasn't full, meaning the father was lacking or not there. So the 9th house is that parenting, the parents as a pair, raising that kid. Okay, 10th house is the father, the 4th house is the mother. So the 12th house has nothing to do with the 4th or 10th house whatsoever. And the Dvadasamsa doesn't have anything to do with the 4th or 10th house specifically. It specifically has to do with the 12th house. Now the 12th house is the house that becomes before the 1st house. The birth house, the 1st house is called Janma, which means birth. Okay, it's the birth house. It's you being born into this world. The 12th house is what comes before that. What comes before that is your past lives. So the 12th house represents your past. Okay, it's your past, the house of past lives more so than any other house. It's your past. We come from our past, we're born from our past, and we're also born from our parents, right? So this is why this Varga has to do with the 12th house and parents, because it has to do with where we come from. Now, the past we come from is not just represented by our parents. We don't just come from our parents. We come from our ancestors. Okay? Our ancestors means 7 generations back. We come from 7 generations back. Our great-grandparents, our great-great-grandparents, all the way to our great-great-great-great-great-grandparents. That's the 7th generation behind us. And the karmas of all those people behind us influence who we are and what happens in our lives. Okay? And likewise, the karmas of what you do in your life today is going to influence 7 succeeding generations of your offspring. Okay? So ancestral karma is a very powerful thing. And it's the Dvadasamsa that represents that ancestral karma. It's the effects of the karmas of your ancestors, how they're influencing your life. Okay? Now, we owe a debt to our ancestors for giving birth to us. And we owe a debt to our great-great-great-great-grandparents because they had their children, which eventually led to us being born. So even to those distant ancestors, we owe a debt of birth. Okay? At the same time, each person has children, generally speaking, the ancestors, that create us, we owe a debt to them, generally speaking. Meaning, just due to the general effect that caused that they had children, and that's us, we owe them a debt. But then those parents specifically owe the children a debt that requires them to raise them. And that's a specific debt. They have to raise children a certain way because of what they owe those children. Okay? And when children, so the child that we have is specifically chosen due to the parents owing a debt to that child, which they pay by raising the child. But then the child owns a general debt of parenthood for somebody actually being willing to raise them. Okay? So, we're strongly attached to our past through our ancestors. Okay, because we come from our ancestors. And that is indicated by the 12th house in the Dvadasamsa. So when the 12th Bhava is good in the Dvadasamsa, it shows our past has been good and our ancestral lineage has been good. If the Dvadasamsa, if the 12th Bhava in the Dvadasamsa is in bad shape, it shows our past has been frustrated and difficult, and our ancestral lineage has been a frustrated and difficult lineage. Okay? When the 12th Bhava is good, the karmas of those good ancestors, of that good ancestral karmas, helps to make our life better. If the 12th Bhava is bad, the negative karmas of our past ancestors is making our life difficult. Okay? And this can really make it sound like, oh gosh, I can blame a lot of my shit on my ancestors. You can't really do that though, because your ancestors are specifically chosen because of your karmic blueprint and what you deserve in your life due to your merit. So if we have a bad Dvadasamsa, a bad 12th house in the Dvadasamsa, which shows negative ancestral karmas that we have to now pay the price for, we only have that because we've merited that through our own ill deeds. Okay? But this is a chart where we see the ancestral influences that manifest into our lives. So the 12th Bhava is important. If the 12th Bhava in the Dvadasamsa is good, chances are everything in life is going to be somewhat better. Let's look at some of the other indications of the 12th Bhava, just so you understand how that works. The 12th Bhava is the Bhava of moksha, liberation. Alright? If we have a lot of negative 12th Bhava in the Dvadasamsa, we have lots of negative ancestral karma that we've merited, it's going to be really hard to become enlightened, right? We almost need to have the blessings we can say of our ancestors as well. If the 12th Bhava is in good shape, then we have good ancestral karma behind us and liberation becomes more readily available. 12th Bhava represents the gain of our last desire. Okay, the last thing we want, do we get it or don't we? That's the 12th Bhava. Okay? And we need to have that last desire fulfilled in order to have liberation. A good 12th Bhava in the Dvadasamsa, it has to do, again, with we're better able to get the last thing we really want. There's a saying in life, a general saying, that what you most want in life is the thing you don't get. Okay? And that's very true in the context of the thing we want most in life is usually indicated by Rahu. Rahu's position will give us a good clue of what somebody really, really wants. And we never get Rahu fully. We never satisfy Rahu's period placement completely where we feel totally happy with it. There's always compromises. So it is true, we never do get what we want most in life exactly the way we want it. Due to Rahu. He's a cruel planet. He never gives it all. But at the same time, we can have the fulfillment of our last desire, okay, which is his 12th house, if we have good 12th houses. And a lot of that has to do with the Dvadasamsa. So if our last desire is able to get fulfilled, then everything in life is going to be better as a result, because that's a big part of everything. Okay, our last desire often has to do with where we have lacks. And if we're able to fulfill that, then that means less lacks, and therefore overall a better life. So a good 12th Bhava in the Dvadasamsa shows overall a better life. just in the concept of just about everything, just shows overall a better life. A lot of life is about competition, fighting and battling, and it really is. And we don't, in our modern culture, it doesn't feel that way too much. But let's look at like just an animal culture. Let's look at lions. Okay, lions kill other cubs. It's a constant battle. You know, they kill other packs. They kill other cats. They kill cheetahs and leopards, you know, if they can, because they want to weed out their competition so that they can have more gazelles to eat out there on the African plains. So there's all this competition, there's always a struggle for survival, this battle. And that struggle for survival is the sixth house. And we can say the shortage in nature, the fact that there's always a shortage in nature, is the sixth house. And the battle to win as a result of that shortage, to have enough, is the eighth house. And the results of that battle are the 12th house, whether you get more or your opposition gets more. And we can really see that in nature, where everything is struggling to survive. Things are fighting each other. Animals fight each other for the right to eat and the right to progenate, okay? To create progeny, to have children. Now humans, we don't do that in that same very violent way, but we do it every day in the context of exams, getting good marks, going to interviews and being competitive and trying to get the good jobs, trying to excel at work so we get the promotion and have more money to buy better food and have a bigger house and send our kids to better college. So even in human society, in modern human society, there's still that daily struggle to get more than all the other billions of people who want it too. With a good 12th house, it shows that you're going to get more than the opposition. A bad 12th house means you're going to lose and more to the opposition, which means more of your life will be negative. Whereas a good 12th house shows more of your life will be good. Okay? So the blessings of the ancestors, that ancestral karma, actually has a huge impact on how good our lives are. That 12th house and that Dvadasamsa is something we should always look at. And a bad 12th house in the Dvadasamsa is going to cause all kinds of problems in a person's life. So if sometimes you see people complain about how terrible their lives are, if things don't look that bad at first, then you look towards that 12th Bhava in the Dvadasamsa, and if you see it's really trashed, that's why they don't have the blessings of their ancestors, so to speak. They don't have good ancestral karma to fructify in this lifetime, which can really help a lot. You know, Asian cultures spend a lot of time worshiping and praying to their ancestors because they realize the importance of their ancestral background in how their life is today. And through the very same way, they don't want to disappoint their ancestors by doing negative things in their lives, because that's going to affect the succeeding generations after them. And they don't want to leave that karmic residue for their children and grandchildren and so on to have to deal with. So when we understand the importance of our ancestral karma, it really is a good motivation to behave nobly in life. Okay? So the 12th bhava is that critical bhava. Now when we square 12, 12 times 12 equals 144. Then 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 4 is 9. So when we square 12, we get the number 9, which is 9th bhava. So the 12th bhava also always results in the 9th bhava. Our ancestral karmas result in, the ancestral karmas that those who've come before us result in the parents we have, the specific parents we have, which is the 9th house, and the parenting role that they have upon us. So this is the strong parental bhava in the Dvadasamsa. You need to look at this for your parental influences. It's a key bhava here. It's the ancestral karmas coming together to raise you through your parents and giving you that initial start in life. And that's when your ancestral karmas affects you the most, is in the beginning of your life when you're being raised by your parents. Because your parents have genetically, which means their mental health, their physical health, their intelligences and skills, their strengths to overcome, all those genetic patterns they have to raise you with come from their parents, come from your 12th bhava, from your ancestors. And of course, you're going to inherit a lot of those things too. So the Dvadasamsa is not only your ancestral, the effects of the ancestral karma, it's the effects of the ancestral, your hereditary traits. And how much is hereditary? So much, right? So much is hereditary. We can blame everything on a gene. He's a good artist because of this gene, which he got from his grandfather. He's a good scientist. He's a good athlete. Those are genetically measurable things. Mental illness, genetically measurable. Everything has a genetic link. And this is the chart that shows that. So, we inherit who we are through our ancestors, through the genes. And that's why the Dvadasamsa in many texts is given as great of importance as the Navamsa and as great of importance as the Rashi chart. It's considered to be a big modification of the Rashi chart. So the Deha, the Rashi chart is the Deha, the body, and the path you're on. But the Dvadasamsa is your ancestral heritage, which defines who you are through the patterns of your DNA, which really defines who we are. So the Dvadasamsa is really every bit as important as the Rashi chart. We need to look at it for everything about how we are entirely, because it's the hereditary influences, which we can spell everything out with hereditary influences if we want to. Okay? How you can sort of look at it, the Dvadasamsa is your influence of your parents, your hereditary environment. Okay? Your DNA that you inherit from your ancestors. The Rashi chart is your environment. Okay? It's the path you're on, the road that you're on in life, your surroundings, your environment. And both those things have a huge influence upon who you become and how you act. Okay? You can put a noble person in a bad environment, and eventually they'll start behaving more badly. Okay? So even if a person has noble genetic tendencies, in the wrong environment, negative tendencies can creep up. So it's really these two vargas, the more than any other vargas, determine who we are, our environment and our hereditary, our hereditary influences. Okay? And also the influences of our parents, which is the 9th bhava in the Dvadasamsa. But the influence of the environment is stronger than the influence of our parents. Children are apt to follow the environment they live in more so than what their parents tell them to do. So if parents want their kids to grow a certain way, the best thing the parents can do is to put them in an environment that supports that growth. And then most of the work will be done for them. So environment is more important than parental influence. But hereditary influence is more important, okay, overall, because if a person just, DNA says you're dumb, your IQ's 90, you're just not a smart person. Sure, you can put that kid in the best schools with the best tutors, but how smart can they ever really get? You know what I mean? If they just aren't intelligently born. Sure, with the best tutors, they can make the most of their limited intelligence, but they'll never be a genius. So, hereditary influences, DNA is really, really critical, and a lot of that is seen in the Dvadasamsa. Okay? So, the Dvadasamsa is a critical varga for just seeing who a person is and what their life will consist of. The other important bhava is adding up the digits in 12. 1 plus 2 equals 3 is the third bhava. Okay? So the third bhava is our associates and siblings. And it's a critical bhava in the Dvadasamsa. Our associates and siblings have so much to do with how our parents end up trying to parent us. If we're a single child, they're going to raise us very differently than if they have 10 kids. Okay? If we're a single child and Or if we're a child that lives out in a place where there's no kids to associate with, play with, the rules our parents lay upon us are going to be very different than if we live in the city with a bunch of kids who are smoking dope. So our associates and our siblings has such a big impact. Their behaviors have a huge impact in how our parents raise us. A good third bhava in the Dvadasamsa shows, again, associates and siblings that make the parental influences more enjoyable and better for you. A bad third bhava indicates associates and siblings and also just willful desires that make for a much, much more difficult upbringing from your parents. Meaning at that point your parents have to be harder on you. So third bhava has a lot to do with just how difficult your parenting is, how hard the parents are on you. And that has a lot to do with just how strong-willed you are, how frustrated your will is, how self-centered your will is. Any of those things, and the parents just have to come down harder on you. So a good third bhava makes for a much more harmonious and enjoyable, communicative upbringing, where a bad third bhava can indicate a much more frustrated upbringing that required more spankings and being locked in the closet and given cold showers, all those different punishments that parents try to come up with to deal with the kid that they don't know how to handle. So that's also an important bhava there, okay? But it also has to do with, how one exerts their will, and how one tries to manifest what's in their consciousness. We've remembered, right, that third bhava has to do with how we manifest what's in our consciousness, with what we want to do. Do you do it in a way that is harmonious and understanding with other people, or do you do it in a way that's really self-centered and therefore hurts other people? Okay? How we do that really influences how we relate to our friends and siblings, and therefore what the parents have to do to us in return. Then adding up all the numbers in the number 12, which is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 plus 10 plus 11 plus 12. That equals, oh gosh, I'll have 6. I didn't write down how it does it. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 3 is 6, plus 4 is 10, plus 5 is 15, plus 6 is 21, plus 7 is 28, plus 8 is 36, plus 9 is 45, plus 10 is 55, plus 11 is 66, plus 12 is 78. 7 plus 8 equals 15. 1 and 5 equals 6. Okay, so we add up all the numbers in number 12, we get the number 6. So the other important bhava in the Dvadasamsa is the 6th bhava. So that's the bhava opposite the 12th house. And it's really pertinent that the bhava opposite is an important bhava in this varga. So the 6th bhava is our debts. It's the house of karma yoga, which means doing the work without being concerned with the fruits. And basically the 6th house is the material work we have to do to pay for the luxuries of the 12th house. And luxuries of the 12th house, what are those? Vacations, having money to spend, to enjoy things. 12th house is the house of liberation. 6th house is the work on earth you have to do to get liberation. Okay? Ultimately, we're all working towards this 12th house, which is the house of ultimate peace and liberation. Okay? And wisdom and understanding. But we have to do material work to acquire that. We have to do our share of the hard work, which is the 6th bhava. We have to work to improve, which is the 6th bhava. So we're not to be limited by our ancestral karmas, but also work and strive to improve that and make things better, which is the 6th bhava. So a good 6th bhava in the Dvadasamsa is just conscientious hard work and effort, regardless of the hereditary influences. So sure, maybe you're only born with an IQ of 90, like Forrest Gump, right? Who's not a really bright guy, who didn't come from a great ancestral lineage. who didn't have great intelligence. But if you look at his sixth bhava in the Dvadasamsa, he made the most of it. He improved upon his potential and became, this really amazing person. That's just a good movie that explains it. But the sixth bhava is where we improve upon our ancestral karma. We improve upon our genetic gifts or lack of gifts. And we work with what we have to do. We do what we have to do as best as we can, put as much work and effort into it to make the most improvement on it that we can and not be limited by our past. And through doing that, we fulfill the responsibilities towards our ancestors. Okay? We burn the karmas, of our ancestors, which is part of our responsibility. For them giving birth to us, we have responsibility to burn some karmas for them. And we do that through that sixth house. So the sixth house of the Dvadasamsa is what helps us improve all the bad houses in the Dvadasamsa. Everything bad, especially a bad 12th house. Okay? And it has to do the work we have to do, the karma we have to do sometimes to pay for the enjoyments and the good things that we've enjoyed in the past, because it's the house of death. Now this house, 12th, 6th house idea is really important in the context of the important bhavas, grahas in the Dvadasamsa. Okay? Dvadasamsa is the 12th varga, but it's the 8th varga that Parashara gives. And therefore it's the 8th planet, which is Rahu, that is the critical bhav graha. But Rahu is really the same as Ketu. Okay, they're the same creature that just happened to be cut in half, but they're the same thing. These together are the 8th graha. Okay? So, Rahu and Ketu are the two important grahas in the Dvadasamsa. The most two important planets to have in good shape. Ketu represents our ancestral past, okay, the strongest ancestral influences in our life, okay? And Ketu, of course, represents our past. Ketu has a strong relationship to the 12th house. It's the karaka, the significator of liberation, of course. Rahu has to do with the karmas that we need to balance and improve upon, the ancestral karmas that we have a karmic responsibility to make better and improve upon. Rahu represents the weaker influences of the ancestors, meaning the influences of the ancestors that were not highly developed. So say your ancestors were not good at business. That's a weak ancestral influence. And so your DNA is going to register a lack of business acumen as well. So everything where you're weak and due to your ancestral influences is Rahu. Okay? So if you're weak-minded because your ancestors had weak-mindedness as an issue. And so it becomes your duty to improve upon that weak-mindedness. Say Rahu was with the moon. Okay? Rahu-moon conjunction. It's your responsibility to work and become more strong-minded and develop that moon, the manas, the mind. So Rahu represents the ancestral weaknesses we're born with and that we need to improve. And it relates to the 6th house. Okay? To work the situation to make it as best as possible. Ketu represents the strong ancestral influences. If Ketu is in good condition, then you've got a lot of strong ancestral and genetic influences to help you have a better life. Okay? Because the ancestral karmas and the genetic influences are the same thing. That's how our ancestors work through us, through the DNA code that they passed on to us. So if Ketu is good, we've got good DNA, good ancestral influences. If Ketu is bad, we've got troubled DNA with lots of quirks and difficult ancestral karmas to deal with. If Rahu is in good shape, the undeveloped aspects of the ancestors, undeveloped qualities and abilities of the ancestors, we're going to more readily be able to master and perfect. Okay? Due to our ancestors having made a lot of effort to improve those weaknesses in their life. So therefore, it becomes easier for us to improve upon those weaknesses. If Rahu is in bad condition in the Dvadasamsa, however, it indicates the ancestral weaknesses that the ancestors did not try to develop were used very terribly. So they just let those weaknesses rule their lives. And so it's so much easier for those weaknesses through your acquired DNA to hurt your life and cause you a lot of trouble. So, when it comes to how much trouble or good Rahu and Ketu can actually do in your life, it's important to study those in the Dvadasamsa, because that's the most important Varga for them. Their condition in the Dvadasamsa is more important than their condition in any of the other Vargas. Okay? Just like, if you're only going to have Venus good in one Varga, the Varga you want it to be good in is the Navamsha. Okay? If Venus is debilitated in all the other Vargas, but exalted in the Navamsha, that Venus is still going to be able to guide you towards a fulfilling path in your life. Okay? Same with Rahu and Ketu. Even if they're very difficult in all the other Vargas, if they're good in the Dvadasamsa, it's going to help make them such better planets. Okay, so just like Mars, we've got to study Mars in the Drekana. We have to study the moon in the Hora. We always got to study each planet in its most important Varga, because that's the Varga that has the biggest influence on that planet. And for Rahu and Ketu, it's the Dvadasamsa. You know, these Rahu and Ketu have to do with the evolution of your consciousness, the growth and development and evolution of your consciousness. And that happens through, that's all linked in the same as your ancestral history and your ancestral path and the DNA you're born with, and therefore the consciousness you're born with and the mentality you have, all of which is formed through your DNA and your upbringing, basically through your ancestors. And that's what makes Rahu and Ketu so critical in this Dvadasamsa. Alright, so you really need to look at those planets in your Dvadasamsa to see just what kind of shape they're in. If Rahu and Ketu are conjunct planets in the Rashi chart, you need to study those planets in the Dvadasamsa. Okay, so say Rahu's conjunct the moon in your Rashi chart. You know, it's an astronomical conjunction. Then you know the moon is something that needs to be developed this lifetime. So look at that moon in that Dvadasamsa. If it's good in the Dvadasamsa, it's going to make it so much better. Or if it's bad in the Dvadasamsa, that's going to be a really bad Rahu-Moon conjunction. Same thing, say Rahu is conjunct the 7th Bhava. Now the 7th Bhava in the Rashi charts, an astronomical conjunction of Rahu to the 7th Bhava. That means the person's growth and evolution is going to happen in the context of relationships. So we really need to see how good relationships are in the Dvadasamsa. Study that 7th house in the Dvadasamsa, the 7th cusp in the Dvadasamsa, and study the planets that are aspecting the 7th cusp in the Rashi, but see their dignities in the Dvadasamsa. And read that Bhava cusp in the Dvadasamsa to see how much progress the person's really going to be able to make. Okay? So these are the important Varga, and you'll find the charts get really, really interesting once you start looking at Rahu and Ketu carefully and completely, and the things they conjunct and aspect in the Dvadasamsa. It'll give you a much more accurate picture of just what is going on with Rahu and Ketu. And of course, we all know that Rahu and Ketu, you can't do a great reading without really paying a lot of attention to Rahu and Ketu, right? They determine so much of what's happening in our lives. In fact, so much of our life and the important things that happen in our life are going to revolve around the Bhava that Rahu's in and the planets that Rahu conjuncts. If a person tells you their life story and they don't tell you about their Rahu position, then they're not telling you the most important things about their life. If anyone tells you, like if you read a biography about someone, Rahu's position is going to be a key thing in their life. Okay? And a lot of their biography will revolve around that Rahu, if it's an honest biography. Okay? And of course, because of so much of our life revolves around it, And because Rahu and Ketu are the critical planets in the Dvadasamsa, it makes sense that the Dvadasamsa is such an important Varga. And also, like some of these texts say, I put some quotes in the beginning. In each sign there are Dvadasamsas which fill the sign with their own influences. These are subtle modifications in respect to the height or depth of action when their influences are combined with those of the terms. So he's specifically saying you really, really have to pay attention to the planet's Dvadasamsa and how it's doing there. This is the biggest modification of the Rashi, of what you see in other places. The biggest modification to that's the Dvadasamsa. And that just makes sense mathematically, doesn't it? The Dvadasamsa is, each sign has within it the entire zodiac. Aries has Aries through Pisces in it. Taurus has Taurus through Aries in it. Gemini has Gemini through Taurus in it. Each Rashi has the entire zodiac, all 12 signs within it via the Dvadasamsa. And if you knew nothing about astrology, that Varga would just make so much sense. Oh yeah, the most sensible division is just dividing each sign into 12 parts and having the whole zodiac in each sign. In the Navamsha, we have 9/12 of the zodiac in each sign. In the Dvadasamsa, we got 12/12, the entire zodiac in one sign. So this is a very complete Varga, and that it's the most important Varga for looking at everything in our lives. It's the biggest modification to the Rashi chart. Okay, so it's a very important Varga. And when you, if you read Prajna books, you're going to see that they emphasize the Dvadasamsa very heavily. You'll find lots on the Dvadasamsa. Okay? Alright, so have fun peeking at your charts. We'll do a bunch of examples using Rahu and Ketu and all this shortly, so you can see the right way to read Rahu and Ketu in the Dvadasamsa. But for now, start looking at your own Dvadasamsas and come to your conclusions and fill out the holes that are left in the Rashi chart about your life and your Rahu and Ketu and see how the Dvadasamsa can add a lot of clarity to it all.